Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Tayte for another entry in the David Fincher Retrospective, the final entry in the David Fincher Retrospective. 12-week series we've been doing on the channel. Listen, we love doing our director retrospectives. We've been building up to The Killer being released on Netflix. The Killer is now out. It's been out in cinemas. It's been out streaming. And we're here to give our in-depth thoughts because this isn't the first video we've done on The Killer. Tayte, you got to watch it a little bit early at the festival. We'll be talking about that. But before we get into all this stuff, how are we doing tonight?
Cold. It's cold in the UK at the moment, but doing okay. Had quite a relaxing day. So, yeah, ready to talk about The Killer again.
It is one of those where it has been building, starring Michael Fassbender, written and directed by David Fincher. The reason I'm looking down is because I saw a quote this morning, which is from the film, and I can't find it already. And it was the opening line of the film where it's like, you don't know how excruciatingly, exhausting it is to do nothing. And that's how it's a Sunday. And I saw that as I was watching the film, which was very weird. My first criticism of saying that, obviously I was watching the film online on Netflix, which we'll be talking about. But as always, we do want to hear from people at home. So do comment below with your thoughts on The Killer. Comment your thoughts on David Fincher's director, Michael Fassbender, in this lead role, and a load of other things. Do get the conversation going. Maybe let us know your favourite Fincher films. We're at the end of the series for now. He is still signed on with Netflix. He's done a bonkers interview. Said that Netflix is the best place for his directors to work. I guess he really just wants season 3 Mindhunter because
he really does.
That's the first time any director said that who's still there, and he does have a year left on his deal. But do get involved, and if you want to find us on social media to find out about other videos, other series we're going to be doing, this series is coming a very interesting place of change, a time of change. We're evolving our channel. We've had the SAG strikes, with the WGA strike. So it's been a very weird few months doing this. 12 weeks is a long time in the industry terms. And I
was going to say, quick question.
Wild.
Is this the last time we're using the old intro?
I believe it is. I could be wrong. Who knows down the line if there's a retro opening of sorts. But I think right now, that's the last time the intro gets played. And it's the only time it's been played for this. So we've spoken to people at Curious about other retrospectives about doing a different intro we've got as part of the package of our new one. So we'll be rolling out some info on that when we have info. But I do believe it is the last one. Because even when I did the Mission Impossible review, and I was going to do the intro, and I was like, oh, we're not doing this anymore. I was like, okay, do the new one. Easy, done. So yeah, it's weird. I think you're right. It is the last one. Strange. After 8.5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, started, mate. 8.5 years, bloody hell. But yes, so you can get social media. Linktree, that's got our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter, our Letterboxd. Our Letterboxd has been updated. There's a whole new load of lists. Film for the weekend, home media reviews, everything like that. We've given that a nice update ready for the next couple of months when we do announce some cool stuff. But before we sort of take this any further, Tayte, I want to head over to you. The IMDb.
Yes.
It's weird doing it because the film's just come out, but this is the weird blend of when we're covering new releases on a retrospective because we've got to still format it like a retrospective. But yes, what is the IMDb plot synopsis for this one?
After a fateful near miss, an assassin battles his employers and himself on an international manhunt he insists isn't personal, which is pretty much straight to the point. I guess it does ruin a little bit of the first kind of part of the film because, and we'll get into this in the actual review, the opening of the film is fantastic and it's quite a long sequence and there's a lot of build up and there's a lot going on. And I hadn't seen this plot synopsis before seeing the film, and I would have immediately said, okay, interesting, we're going to go into the life of this killer. But in fact, the entire film is based around him missing the shot. So I wasn't expecting that. And I don't know why I wasn't expecting him to miss the shot and the entire film be based around that. I didn't really do too much research going into it beforehand. I think I saw one trailer and that was it. And the trailer doesn't really reveal anything at all. It's just got Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross with a pulsating soundtrack going and some montages from the film. But no, that kind of it's interesting because I didn't see that coming in the film itself, that first part after a fateful near miss. So interesting that they would reveal that in the synopsis.
I mean, I won't talk about the intro of the film yet. I want to talk about the titles later. Don't let me forget because I've seen some really interesting stuff about that this weekend. But whilst we're here talking about as I said, with the series, we're able to talk about our experiences, our memories of other films. This is very fresh to us both. Of course, this is released on Netflix this Friday. I'll jump in first. My memories watching it because yours is far more interesting than mine. I didn't get to see it at the London Film Festival because there were train strikes on the day. This was the 8 a.m. screening, and I couldn't have got home if I went. So that was the first hiccup, shall we say. And the second one, when Netflix do their limited release cinemas here in the UK, that basically means independent cinemas plus Showcase plus Everyman. Pretty much no other chains. If there are other chains, comment them so other people know. But I'm pretty sure, and Pitch House, if we can even classify that, because they're owned by Cineworld. So I was going to watch this at the cinema. It came out on October 27th. We got Mankin early. I was like, brilliant. We've still got another sort of 10 days till the review. I'm going to go watch this. And my Showcase was only showing it at 9:30, one showing a day on the 1 week where I'm not free at 9:30 at night because I wouldn't be getting home till 1:30 and I had other plans. And I thought, great. Even a Saturday. And I was ready to go Saturday morning. I was already dressed. I was like, okay, let's see what time it's on. And it was 9:30 and I was like, taking the piss. So I have had to wait to watch this on Netflix. I watched it this morning in the comfort of bed. And that's my experience watching a new David Fincher film. Thanks, Netflix. Right. Let's hear yours, though, which is far better.
So for a film that's only been out for a few days, I've already seen it twice. And normally a film like this, I wouldn't see twice. I'm not saying it's a bad film or anything like that, but normally I give a bit of time to breathe. But of course, I had to rewatch it for the review we're doing now. And the first time I watched it was in a completely packed screening at London Film Festival. I think got in at like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning to be able to get into the screening. Reasonably large queues. There was quite big queues this year because they were doing it outside the Picture House, and the queues were sometimes going all the way into actual Leicester Square, which was crazy. But managed to get inside. As far as the viewing experience is concerned, it's an interesting one. And this is especially kind of the case when you go to festivals and stuff like that. Certain films have a lot of hype going into them, certain films don't. And for some strange reason, this film had the only thing that people were talking about beforehand was a completely different assassin film with a similar title called Hitman. And that's all that people were interested in.
Yeah.
People weren't really interested in The Killer, even though we're about to watch The Killer. People were saying, oh, yeah, Linklater's new film, Hitman, is kind of getting better praise, better kind of reviews and stuff like that, which was fascinating. I watched the film. The film's okay. It's fine. It's not Fincher's best. It's not Fincher's worst. There are some parts of it which I really enjoyed, and I definitely have different experiences between watching it the first time at the festival and watching it a second time around where I've got a bit more time to analyze it and I know exactly what's coming up. But it's unusual because I'll say this once again. I know it's a Netflix film, but this film needs to be seen in cinemas. It just needs to be. Cinema's all about the experience, and sometimes films that go onto Netflix, fine. It's like a simple sit at home on your sofa, watch down in the evening kind of film. This isn't that kind of film. This film has great, cinematography. This film's got great directing. It's really kind of lowly lit, so you need it to be on a big screen to be able to actually see anything. Like it baffles me that it didn't get a wider cinema release, especially being a Fincher film. Fincher can draw in a crowd, so I'm surprised, especially given the time slot of when it came out. There's not really much else going on right now. There's no other film like it out there right now. So why on earth was it not given a bigger cinematic release?
I almost made a dreadful pun unintentionally, and I was going to say it's got killer artwork, but the film's called The Killer. So this is sort of irrelevant to the review, but I'm the quad posters like these. I'm in a collectors group on Facebook for these, and people for the last month have been head over heels trying to get The Killer quad posters because the posters for this film are outrageously excellent. And I know we've had the Mank review, and I criticised that film a lot. I said the Mank posters were phenomenal. The hand-drawn stuff, and I've loved it with this. You mentioned that first trailer. The first trailer was great. A montage. Didn't need anything else. Films about Killer. Didn't need to know the story. So to end up watching it at home is disappointing by itself. And listen, I'm not a snob. I'm not being rude, but I wasn't going to if I was not watching it in my nearest showcase or independent cinema that would have had it, it would have been talking like, I might as well just gone to London for the day. And I do go to London a lot for screenings. And I was ironically in London for football, but no screenings to The Killer. And off that experience this morning, you sort of mentioned being that sort of dark environment. When I say it's a very personal film, it's not psychological, but you follow the killer played by Michael Fassbender. And not only is he the protagonist, he is the narrator of the film. It is all through his entire point of view. It is not through anybody else. I could be wrong. I feel like he's in every single scene of this film.
He is in every single scene of this film.
Yeah. And for me, with a film such as this, I prefer watching these in the cinema because you feel somewhat more connected to the lead. I'm not saying I concentrate better in a cinema than at home. You're lying if you're saying you can be as invested as a film at home as a cinema. Like, yes, I have my phone, I have a laptop. They can be distractions, but you're still in the comfort of your home. You haven't made the effort to go out. You haven't paid for a ticket. You've not got the drink. You're not sat for the adverts. You lose something at home, and it's so much more than just the film on the screen. And for this one in particular, I felt like that cinema environment would have actually been better for the reading and what this film is doing, and to learn more about this individual, how he operates, how he functions. So maybe some of it's on me, somewhat of my reaction, because I've seen it at home. But this is the problem with Netflix we have. They're a streaming service. When films are made for Netflix, they're not going to go to the big screen. And if they are, they're going to be limited screenings. And the one Netflix film that got a wide release 1 year ago, they refused to release the box office numbers because it would have proven the point that you need to release films at the cinema for people to see, especially when it's a sequel to a film made $300 million. So it's really tricky with this because I know that David Fincher, we spoke of Mank, that he struggled to get the project greenlit in the past. I know he's spoke about Netflix a lot. He's got a good working relationship with them. He's in his third year of his Netflix 4-year deal. He's defended them this week on the news while promoting this film, of course. Also, he's not had his leading actor or any of the cast to do promotional work for this film, which would suffer because the general audience, they might not be aware of it now. But if there's talks, it's the simplicity of the marketing. It's the same thing the Marvels. Not that they need comparisons at box office, but when the only person that can promote your film is the director, that's not an easy sell at all. So it's really tricky with this heading into today and where we are. And maybe this will have impact. I've seen the film once, not twice. Most of the series, I've had a few first-time watches of the series, so it's great to complete this director. But my sort of initial thoughts were I'm fine with the film. I'm a little bit not lukewarm on it because it's a very cold film by design, by story, by tone. But at the same time, I feel like my anticipation is somewhat not beaten, but maybe bruised because I've not been able to watch this the way I wanted to. Even with LFF, I can't imagine watching this at 8 a.m. I mean, the McDonald's at the start would make me hungry for one.
It was. I'll be honest. It's a weird and heavy film for 8 o'clock in the morning. But then again, you could say the same for Flower Moon.
Pretty much every 8 a.m. film you kind of get.
There was only one or two films where I think Holdovers was probably the one where I genuinely was happy that I watched it in the morning because it brightened my day. But all the other films, for various different reasons, tonally, it's very, very. It was quite a hard-hitting festival this year with the film-wise. So. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess with Fincher's relationship to Netflix, and now we've gone through all of his films, and we're kind of into his Netflix era of his films, TV shows, and just various different projects. The fact that he has defended them, I mean, I guess he's been given full creative freedom here.
Yeah,
he's been allowed to make the projects that he's had set on the shelf for a long time. Whether it's Mank as a kind of familial project, or whether it's this, which has been in production for a very long time as well. And he's been trying to get off the ground going. So I can only assume that, he's very supportive of them because they've basically allowed him to go and do the projects that he wants to do. And
except Mindhunter.
Yeah, well, except Mindhunter, but he was able to get the first 2 series out of Mindhunter.
Yeah.
Either way, I know that Mindhunter is very popular. I absolutely adore Mindhunter. But as far as his actual, film-based projects, he's been able to do exactly what he wants. And, he will defend them because of that.
And I get it. And this is the Netflix spectrum, right? And the film that changed everything for me was a film called Mute, which is directed by Duncan Jones. I was going to say David Bowie said yes, that's who he is, but he's director of Moon and Source Code and then Warcraft, which is then why he ends up at Netflix. And I remember watching the film Mutant, and he spoke a lot in the press that it was so amazing to be at a studio where he had full creative control. And I really do respect it. And it should be, I don't say not a given, because that makes me sound terrible. Watching Mute was the first time I 180'd on streaming, where I thought, you know what? It is great that directors have complete creative freedom, but a studio does need to interfere. But sometimes it'd be nice if a studio gave them notes and they said, listen, we really don't think this one's going to go. Could be perhaps do this. The way your studio should be involved, not saying do this, but working with them. And it is amazing that Netflix give everyone complete creative control. The problem is that sometimes your lesser films, your worst films, end up being a lot worse than they would be if they were going to get marketing campaigns, were going to get money, because they can chuck this to it's coming out on Netflix, but you'll never see a trailer anywhere else in your life because they don't need to market it because they've already wasted enough money making it. And it's really tricky with Fincher because I fully get him. And this, again, what we spoke about throughout this whole series, his experience at Alien 3, not just like changed his career, but that is the foundation of his career working in film. That is not just his first film, but we can't look at his career with this. Look at him growing like a Nolan, right? A couple of films for studio here and there. Now he's his own brand. It was terrifying, awful experience. I will now only do the films if I can have control on these films, which is exactly what he's done, which is incredibly rare. And I remember reading, I don't speak about reviews, and we don't ever talk about Rotten Tomatoes, but I believe this is the 11th film in a row of his to get Rotten Tomatoes like fresh. That means nothing to me, but on the basis of an overall, the 11 films in a row this director's essentially had a hit with critics is very rare indeed, because
he is easily one of the most he's one of the most consistent. Yeah, exactly.
And this is where we are with The Killer. That on paper, this is a project I was down for. I'd probably have watched the film this, if I'm honest, directed by anyone. You mentioned Hitman. Netflix have unfortunately picked up the rights for the Hitman for 20 mil, so I won't be able to be seeing that one at the cinema. But they paid a lot of money for the Hitman, which is such a shame. Everyone that's seen it, and this is, I think, unfairly is on The Killer now, that because in the festival circuit, not just London, I think they were both at Venice as well. They both premiered at Venice. The Assassin's film everyone started talking about was then The Hitman, not The Killer. And obviously The Killer's come out. I'm sure we'll get Hitman details in the coming months, hopefully. But it's really interesting how Netflix works. And I fully understand, especially for Fincher, probably having a film made like Mank for him, which was so personal with his relationship with his dad. This film has been in production for decades. I mean, we talked to him behind the scenes. It was based off a French graphic novel from the late 90s. Now, interesting, I don't know. I couldn't find when it was translated into English, but it's on a lot of lists of 2006, 2007 time, like IGN and whatnot. So I'm wondering if the English translation came years after. I couldn't tell you. I don't have that information to hand. But in 2007, the rights were picked up by Brad Pitt's Plan B Productions to work with Paramount, to work with David Fincher from the get-go. Now, Brad Pitt and David Fincher have starred in 3 roles with 3 films. And you would just assume that this film would get made, but it didn't. There's no details. We're still in the early days of The Killer. We don't know if it was just shelved. We don't know if it was we don't want to fund this. I personally think it's probably more of this is purely speculation. I think if Plan B have the rights, this was a film where if it's not Brad Pitt, it wasn't going to get made. That's generally how I feel. But along comes a 4-year Netflix deal, and The Killer is the first one. Netflix pick up the rights from Plan B. And even more interesting, which is the Michael Fassbender dynamic. Fincher wasn't going to make this until he met Michael Fassbender. And it was only after they had started to get to know each other, Fincher essentially says, now I will make The Killer. Which makes me think that David Fincher was always waiting till the right lead came along before committing to a film such as this, which is very, very interesting, because I certainly have felt like this with films before. I don't want to jump to obviously Oppenheimer. I want to say a Scorsese one is missing in my head which one, but sometimes you watch a film and when it's coming out, the director will say it could only ever have been this person, or I was never going to do it until this person signed on board. And I feel that that's what we've got. We've had a bit of gold, and it's once again David Fincher working with an actor he's not worked with before, which also caught me off guard. I don't know why. I thought they had worked with each other, but they really hadn't, which is very strange. And also, It's Michael Fassbender's first film in 4 years. Talk about a breakaway industry. The last film we saw him in was
Dark Phoenix.
Dark Phoenix, yeah. And he was all right in that film. He had the great train sequence.
Yeah. Did he also have was Dark Phoenix the one where he had the coin in the forest? Is that Dark Phoenix? I can barely remember that.
No, that was Apocalypse. That's when he
Apocalypse.
magically had a family and they killed them straight away.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
So those films are just blank from my memory completely. So there we go. No, it's fascinating that I cannot see Brad Pitt in this role. Just want to throw that out there straight away. Absolutely not. And I feel like I can't really see anyone other than Fassbender playing this character now that I've seen Fassbender play it. But the fact that kind of, Fincher didn't want to go ahead with this project until he met with Fassbender, and then he was like, okay, this is the right person for this role. We can move ahead now. And you can kind of tell that from the actual kind of character itself. Fassbender suits the role perfectly. He plays that kind of cold, kind of unblinking, actually unblinking, does not blink in the film kind of killer instinct who kind of starts to second guess his judgment, but has a plan that he always sticks to. Never lets the emotion get in the way, but you can kind of tell there's a tiny little crack in that. And it's kind of played very, very, very well. I think he perfectly suits the role, and this film wouldn't be as good if he didn't nail the role, because I'll be perfectly honest, and this is me skipping ahead to kind of my final thoughts and everything like that. The rest of the film is kind of bland, and in some cases I'm not a big fan of. Fassbender is the only reason why I'm sticking around for this film. He is the lead character. He's the narrator. We follow him. He's in every single scene, as we've already said. But all of the other characters are disposable and also could easily be interchangeable and don't really bring too much to the actual film. It's all about Fassbender's reactions and actions within this film. And, the way he's able to play this kind of cold assassin who's gone rogue is just really, really well put together. And that only works when, the actor's right for the role. And I'm guessing Fincher was waiting around for that.
Yeah, and that's how I am with this too, actually, if I'm going with... And I think that's why it functions, and we say that Fassbender doesn't... If your lead isn't working in a film where the lead's going to be in every single scene, that film is not going to work. And it doesn't matter if you surround them with the best supporting actors in the world or the best minor characters in the world. It still comes down to your lead role. And credit for this film, actually. I know we're not in the character moment yet, but the fact that the rest of the cast are also not named, they are all the insert title here. I've always liked stuff like that in film. I know it was weird when Tenet came out. There was this humongous criticism. It's like, haha, Nolan can't write characters. He calls his lead character the protagonist. I'm like, I don't mind that. I mean, Fight Club, the narrator. I mean, it's just a continuation years later, like the killer. And I don't see it as a sign of weakness because they didn't name someone. I think it shows a purpose. And in some films, absolutely. For a film as cold and emotionless as this, why would you need the details? What effect would that have on this film if you knew anyone's name? And it shows that not just not recurring the theme, but with the theme of this and it being, I hate the words that the film's got cold in the sense of emotion, but this is all very intentional from the direction. If we're talking about Fincher's direction for this, it's kind of what we say, Reek, right? I cannot sit here and fault the direction itself. I cannot sit here and say the editing's dreadful. The film that has been crafted functions as a film with extremely high competence. Now, maybe my issue is the story or certain individual moments within the script, but my issue is not the direction. And I know that is part of the direction, of course, getting that story to the screen and whatnot, but certainly, when we're 12 films into the series, and it's really awkward to say because every film since 7 we've come on and called him a perfectionist. Now there's been no actors promoting this film, so we can't find out how many hundreds of takes Michael Fassbender's had to do certain scenes for. But it's one of those where, well, unfortunately for Michael Fassbender, I say he's not had a film out for 4 years. I saw a great tweet which says, unfortunately for Michael Fassbender, the SAG strike lifts just in time for him to start promoting Next Goal Wins, which was sheesh. Yeah, technically he would have had a film out 2 years ago, but a different story. But it's tricky with this because, again, I've got no issue with the direction, and I actually think I can't say I know David Fincher. but he feels like quite a cold individual. Like when we listen to him in interviews, he's not just a savage. He's very to the point. He's very cutthroat, and his opinions and how we read of how he, I don't say treats the cast, that's unfair, but how he directs his cast is very clear. I'm the boss. I'm the director. You are hired. You're an actor. You work for me. A David Fincher assassin film kind of works. It fits where his career's gone, and you've seen Mindhunt, not me, but the inner psychology of an assassin is certainly something that I don't think deviates far from what he's done in the past. Now, obviously, I know Mindhunt is about serial killers, so maybe it was an obvious leap of sort of story to tell, but the opening 20 minutes, I'll give my biggest criticism of the film now. I hated the title sequence. And I'll say this because it feels, and this is where I'm going to rant about Netflix again, it feels like an algorithm where the film immediately is this here's bullets being loaded, here's this, here's that, dramatic, quick music, title, zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. It reeks of, you'd watch the first 40 seconds, think this is some big action film. And then here's a 20-minute sequence of the assassin talking about life, talking about humanity, work. A very, what's the word I'm looking for? Lethargic opening, which is why the opening is so good, because this is the character. He is distant. This is his job. I love the things where sometimes we'll be waiting 5 days, and it's so much harder in the 21st century with cameras. And I loved all of the monologue stuff at the beginning, and the title sequence is so jarring, and it just reeks of Netflix want an algorithm based, get people in off that.
It doesn't.
That's a really random tangent.
No, I agree with you. It doesn't quite fit the film, and I know they use it as part of their advertising of the film. And I was surprised that it was so brief and yet so it doesn't fit the theme of the film at all. And we've always, throughout this entire series, we've gone, in some of the films we've gone, what's the best part of Fincher's film? It's the opening sequence. This is fantastic, really well done, memorable. Yet with this film, it's completely forgettable and it almost shifts the tone too much. I don't know how else you could have had an opening sequence to this. I think this film works best as a cold open of, Fassbender doing his yoga stretches and starting monologuing. I think that's the best way this film actually works. I know we've had films like Fight Club, which have been very narrator heavy. And, in fact, Fight Club, you can make so many different comparisons to it, but at least that has a memorable kind of, title sequence that leads into it. And,
what it feels like, sorry for jumping in, but once you get the failed assassination, at that point it feels like they need to have a title sequence, because it's been such an intentional. It's setting the story up. It's a completely different film from that point on. And in my head, I'm not trying to correct anything, but it feels like that's where the natural placement of those title sequences could have come in. But it's like weird, energetic title sequence opening go. So then it's the slow burn assassination for 20 minutes. And
I'll be honest, most of the film does hit with a slow burn, and then it'll quickly ignite, and then it will come down again. And it's one of those kind of films where it goes in waves, and we have different sections of the film where we're introduced to, the lawyer, the brute, the expert, as they go through. But especially for this opening sequence where he's going after the target, it's such an intense sequence. It's so well put together. We learn everything we need to know about, Michael Fassbender's character. We learn enough about the target, and we learn enough about his job that we know exactly what's going on. We see the entire scene play out. You have the tension building moments, the moments where he's almost caught, the moments where he's trying to get his breathing down, the moments where, he actually has his eyes on the target. Just simple moments like going out into the street and having to explain I need to get this amount of protein in my system, kind of, keeping to that diet, and, him explaining that he based his look off a German tourist. It's stuff like that. Excellent. Brilliant.
Yeah. And
it builds all up into this point. But like you said, it's almost better if the title sequence comes after all of that, because the title sequence goes like the trailer did, crazy, wacky, action adventure. There's so much action in this film, you have no idea. Pulsating music. There's only one scene that actually kind of fits that entire vibe, and that's when he's dealing with Brute, and that's it. The rest of the film does not fit that pulsating kind of, almost nightclub-esque John Wick styled kind of scenes and stuff like that. So I think a tone is definitely something that is wrong with this film in certain areas. And, you know, it's broken up into, was it 5 or 6 segments? But the tone is so wildly different in some of them. And it's such a, you know, kind of tonal whiplash you get from it is ridiculous. So the opening credits don't help for that at all, because it doesn't set the same tone the film deserves.
Yeah, and I know it's a graphic novel, and listen, I don't want to sound like some like smart ass comic person, but I didn't read comics anymore. But I always loved that. You know, I always have the analogy, right? Do you call it a film or do you call it a movie? And there's no wrong answer, but you can certainly have a reading of how people view each thing. I've always felt like that with comic books. I read comic books, I read graphic novels. You're kind of reading the same thing, but I'm reading a graphic novel sounds far more eloquent than I'm reading comic books. And that's not me dissing on anyone that does. That's not me dissing on them. I've read a lot of them over the past, but it does feel like when I think graphic novel, I think of, okay, that's just a complete set of comics, because comics release every month and you've bought all 6 issues and you combine them to make the book, which is what's been on sale. And The Killer kind of is that, right? You mentioned there, it's like different chapters. Issue 1, this has to gone wrong. Issue 2, kill this person. Issue 3, this person. 4, that person. 5, that person. 6, finale. It's a 6-point run. And I like the fact this film, I don't say adapts, I don't know the source material at all, but it does feel like that. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think everyone's going to interpret differently. I'm with you. At points, it feels colder, and the structure is like, okay, now we've had the lawyer one of the books done. Now we're going to have the muscles. Now we're going to have the smart one, and now we're going to have the boss one. And for a Fincher film, for the very first time, I think I've said this, it felt very predictable. And I actually, without sort of criticizing the ending, I actually am not a fan of the ending. Not that, I didn't want him to not kill the person. I don't see any character's growth in this film. But I found it peculiar that certain minor, irrelevant characters that have done no wrong to this killer are being killed. Yet the one at the very finale is kept alive. I know why. I know he's threatened. Fine. I understood all of that very easily. But I just felt like people have been killed for less, and I don't think it was a moment of growth for the character. I felt it was because this is what happened in the book. And I completely agree with having this guy living in fear, blah, blah, blah. I just felt like there was just something very peculiar about what he'd done in some of those earlier scenes. Because I don't want to say I liked him seeing snap someone's neck, but I loved the stairs and the neck snap. I was like, brilliant, because he's already told us ages ago that the best way to kill someone was to make it look like an accident in a house, and he's gone and done it again. So there's things I really appreciate that the film sets up and delivers with, but I just felt like by the end of it, I was just like, I get it, and I know why he's done it, but I'm not fully certain I believe this character would seriously do this.
The growth we get for the character throughout the film is almost like a downward spiral. He makes a mistake in the first part, and then he becomes kind of wilder and wilder as we go through, a bit more feral, a bit more rough around the edges, not as clean and as kind of, as kind of processed as he put himself forwards at the very start of the film, where everything has to be measured down to the millimeter. Towards the end of the film, he may as well be kind of, murdering people in a park, just in open daylight, and that's basically what he's doing. So it's one of those where there is progression throughout the film, but then that's all kind of dropped at the ending, where he's like, okay, I'm going to let you live, but you're going to live in fear. And then he's on a beach. It's like, what? Like, come on. Like, either I want some comeuppance to the character because he's getting sloppy and he wasn't able to keep to his routine and keep to his thing, or I want something to connect back, or just something like either him to go back to, actually, I'm going to continue being the killer, but I'm going to go back to my clean ways. I'm going to get back on track. So at least it's cyclical. In the end, there is no development of him, because it's like he ends up on a beach. It's frustrating for me, and I was definitely blindsided by the ending the first time around watching. And this is a big thing between kind of my first viewing experience at the film festival and watching it at home. At the film festival, I didn't know what was coming in the film. I thought the pacing wasn't very good for the film. I didn't like it. Brilliant opening sequence, paced very well, and then the entire middle part of the film seemed to drag for me. everything up until I'd say Tilda Swinton comes in. Yeah, really, really dragged. Tilda Swinton's scene was brilliant. I mean, she's a great actress. You know, she always puts on a great role. And then after that, the film just kind of ends very, very abruptly. Like the final kind of stalking and stuff like that, it feels like there should have been more time put to it because, I mean, as we said, it's a graphic novel. I'm assuming the finale would have been the big build up to a finale when actually in the end it really isn't. And I was really kind of taken aback by the abrupt ending of the film. I think it was the first film that I saw in the festival where it didn't get a clap. Normally people clap at the end of the film at the end in the film festival. That one did not get a clap, and I was like, "Oh, cold reception!" Like kind of caught off guard because it just ended. On rewatch, I think the pacing was slightly better, but I knew what was coming. I knew that we were coming towards the end. We were building towards the finale, so I was looking out for more details, more technical things, and stuff like that. I still don't like the ending. I still think the pacing's off, but it didn't catch me as much off guard because I knew exactly what was coming in the end.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the ending, the pacing. You are right. As soon as you said the middle, until Tilda Swinton, from the moment the assassination attempt fails, back to Tilda Swinton, it felt like a blur, and that's me at home as well. I'm not sitting there doing other stuff, but I'm like the other characters we met. It wasn't just. I mean, Charles Pennell pops up, who is Warlock from Top Gun Maverick, who isolated fist bump that turned up at the start of Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. And I was like, oh my god, Warlock's in this too, brilliant. Just like when he popped up in The Mandalorian for no reason. It's like, brilliant, Warlock's in this too. Horrible way to go. 3 times with a nail gun in the chest. Slow puncture. Great. Like that stuff. If this is a David Fincher's Assassin's film, go for it. But it just felt so strange, some of these other things. I wasn't invested in these characters, and I know it's a very cold world. You know, it's assassins killing assassins. Of course, they're not going to be likable or lovable. But I felt like there was a bit of... There was a humanity missing because that's the purpose. There was no humanity, but I don't think it translated well to screen. And I might be in a minority thinking that I haven't spoken to too many people about it. I know that others everyone's had very sort of different reactions to this film. Again, nothing over the top, nothing ridiculously over the top, like nothing insane either side as what you spoke about again with me in the Marvels, that there's a difference between overhyping and underhyping, and this just sits in that middle. And it is sort of interesting that it sort of fizzled. And kind of talking to characters again, I do wonder with Fassbender, who I like in this film. I really like Michael Fassbender in this film. But do I like Michael Fassbender in this film because he's an actor that I very much enjoy seeing on the big screen? Or do I like Michael Fassbender in this film because of the character he's playing? And that's where I'm torn at present. And I know you've seen it twice, so you're going to be far better as sort of answer these than me. But I think his performance is great. But I know that Michael Fassbender can do a performance like this. And if I'm being really honest, it didn't feel out of the ordinary for a Michael Fassbender performance. It certainly didn't feel like the latter X-Men films where it's not a paycheck, but like it didn't feel like a true obligation. But I feel like he's playing a very two-dimensional character. And I think he does the best with the source material he has. And it just makes me want to see some more great Michael Fassbender performances because he is an incredible actor who we have not seen for a long time.
I agree. I think his performance isn't anything special, but it's Michael Fassbender, so it's good. It's not anything like... It's kind of how you'd expect him to play the role if you're like playing an assassin who doesn't blink and, you know, is really, really cold and cruel and, you know, doesn't really, you know...
Is that true? He doesn't blink in this film, or is that a different film?
He doesn't blink in this film. He doesn't blink.
I saw something about a film online. I wondered if it was this one.
So I was watching it for the second time. I was watching out for it, and the only time where I can see him kind of ish blink is when he's waking up at the start of the film. That's it.
Okay.
And then throughout every single scene, his eyes are just locked, just like that the entire time, which is crazy. I can only assume that he would have said to, you know, Fincher, hey, I'm going to do this as part of my role. Or I don't think Fincher requested it. I think Fassbender initiated it with this one. But absolutely crazy he was able to do that. And, you know, I'm assuming there would have been a lot of retakes or different editing tricks to make sure that, you know, he kept his eyes open for the entire scene and everything like that. But
I mean, he races at Le Mans, doesn't he? I don't know if you know about his personal life. It's wild. An actor does that, and it's not a gimmick. It's not. This isn't a typical actor does one thing and claims it's a new career. He's legitimately raced in.
He's a good racer as well.
Racing. Yeah. Probably too old now, but I'm not going to do the James Bond question. But we're talking the killer. We're talking assassins. He's a name that was thrown around a lot, many a time ago. I don't think he's going to be the next Bond. But I'd love to ask you, because I know you're a Bond fan, obviously. Do you think, had Craig have gone in the mid-10s, he would have been Bond? I think he would have.
I think he would have. I think he would have played a very interesting Bond.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask that, and not for the sake of it, but this might be the closest we get to him playing Bond. My dreams of him appearing in a Star Wars film are still valid. Again, the X-Men First Class Argentina bar scene was, to me, his audition for a Star Wars film. And I've said that from day one. That might be one of the earliest videos on the channel, is me talking about how Michael Fassbender needs to be in a Star Wars film as a villain. But that's a very, very different conversation to the killer. Sorry to put it on that tangent. Do you want to talk about any other cast members? Because I've written them down, but they're all very minor roles. Tilda Swinton
plays a role in a very short amount of the film. She's fine.
The Expert's her character name.
Yeah, I got a giggle about the fact that she was called a Q-tip. That kind of, you know, that was it. And, you know, I did quite like, you know, the fact that, you know, she plays off as being this kind of actually quite lovely and reasonable person, but then she's got a knife in her hand, you know, when he shoots her. So, you know, that plays well into the character. And that's a lot of character development for a character that's on screen for like 5-10 minutes. Apart from that, I'll be perfectly honest, no. I have nothing really to say about the other characters, and this is my biggest flaw for the film. It's the fact that, you know, this film's side characters are really, really big side characters. No one comes in and puts in like a powerhouse performance. No one comes in and puts in like a cameo performance that people are going to be talking about, or really even a performance that's, you know,
memorable. I literally think it's Tilda Swinton, no one else. I mentioned Charles Parnell. That's not even me talking about his performance.
Charles Parnell
it's just because I was sat there thinking, yes, Top Gun Maverick. What a performance in Top Gun. This.
I mean, when we're talking about Mank, one of my favorite scenes from Mank was Arliss Howard being the head of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and, you know, his kind of talk through the studio scene. Not only did I not recognize him in this film, but also the performance was just like, yeah,
he's on the phone for half of it, and
the only person who I can say gives a performance where I was like, okay, fair enough, you know, you actually made me feel something for a second, was Kerry O'Malley for Dolores, the only character in the film with an actual name, who is Charles Parnell's assistant, who, you know, is given a little bit of time to plead for her life, and that's kind of the only acting we get out of any other character.
And she knows she's dead from the moment as well. She's
100%. She knows she's dead from the moment he walks into the room. Like, not even from the moment he starts actually being aggressive, but the second he walks in, she's like, okay, no, done, kind of situation.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, I did like that role. And again, the next snap, brutal way to go. But it made logical sense.
It was memorable.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Okay, let's not talk. Let's talk some music, shall we? Because we're going to talk about more than
Smiths.
Just
we're just going to talk about the Smiths, aren't we?
There's a lot of the Smiths in this.
Was there even a score to this? Because I didn't recognize there being a score apart from the opening sequence. All I recognized was just the Smiths' greatest hits playing on repeat.
I'm in the same vein. People, again, being on the other end of not watching the festival, a lot of people are like, it's a great score by Trent Reznor-Ross. I'm like, half people are saying they even have like the Smiths is great, and I was watching it, I was like, I haven't really picked up on the score. And I know in Mank last week I said how much I love the score, and the fact that Trent Reznor-Ross obviously wasn't doing the sort of, I don't know what you'd call the tech soundtrack type thing, but it was traditional orchestral because it was set in the 1920s, 30s golden age of Hollywood. I really didn't notice the soundtrack on this, and a lot of people spoke about it being very intensive. This isn't like Gone Girl, where there's an incredibly tense, every scene feels like something's going to happen. And I wondered if that was part and parcel of this being a film about an assassin. It's not just predictable, but the big music cues, the cues where you'd expect music of sorts or the soundtrack to kick in, was the Smiths. and I don't really have any thoughts on that. It's not. It's actually, I don't want to use the word disappointing, but given the work they've done with Fincher over the last sort of 10 years, it's a bit disappointing if I'm really, really honest. Nothing against the Smiths at all either. I like the fact that he has this weird fascination with, well, not weird fascination with the band, but he has to play the music to calm himself. Well, you know what? Gary Oldman and Leon did that better 25 years ago. And I will never forget that. So it's hard for me to take anyone else seriously. But I don't have much in the score either, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, I need to listen to an isolated version of the score because for me it didn't stand out. I think that's because some of the big moments from the film were partnered with the Smiths, and therefore that stands out more. And like we said, the characters are a bit forgettable. The score's a little bit forgettable, or at least not recognizable beyond kind of the Smiths where it comes in for the big moments. The only thing that really stands out is Michael Fassbender, and even then we've said kind of his performance in itself isn't anything out of the ordinary from his acting ability. You could say that direction was pretty good, and you know it's definitely his style. You can tell it's a Fincher film from the very off, and you know it's well shot and it's well done in that sense. But at the same time, like, yeah, it just doesn't stand out, and the score doesn't stand out. It's just there are so many things that could have been done better in this film but weren't, and we're not heavily criticizing the film. What we're saying is, it could have been better. It could have been not perfect, but it could have been a lot better. We could be talking about this and talking in the same sentence as Oscar nominated, but we're not. And that's a real shame for it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with them that I think they're all capable of more. And listen, sometimes I'm trying to think of a film that's done it recently. You have a film where there's no actual soundtrack and it's just made up of real songs. And there's never, as Tarantino, like Ennio Morricone, Hateful Eight was the first ever actual soundtrack he'd composed for him. Obviously, won an Oscar. Phenomenal soundtrack, actually, very much. And you know what? I've done a massive 180 on Hateful Eight over the last sort of few years.
I haven't seen it in a while. I've only seen it once since release. So
that's the one. I'm not saying we're doing one, but if a Hateful Eight review ever came up, I think that's the one a lot of people over the years have sort of been different with. Which I know it turned into a bloody Netflix series, which was dumb. But anyway, sorry, different series. Also saved off Netflix though. Yeah, just why? Sorry. Let's talk a bit more. So, we always talk at this point about the legacy of the film. It's been out for 3 days. We can't really do that. But we've spoke about how it's had limited screens. We've spoken about the fact it's obviously on Netflix now. We obviously don't know if it will get any nominations at the Oscars, if any. We obviously never know box office for the very, very, very limited places that had it screening. I want to sort of pose you the question. Now, obviously, it's November. We're going to be heading to award season over the coming months. I don't want to just sit here and predict things because it's easy to do. We haven't said every film. The For Your Consideration campaign hasn't even kicked off for this. But do you think this will get a single nomination? If I'm being really honest, I don't think it will.
Will it sneak one? That's the question. Will it sneak one?
And I don't know how Netflix want to play their game. I don't know. There's a blatantly really obvious film coming out in a few weeks, which I've missed. Maestro. Netflix which studio was it? Apologies to change subjects. A year or two ago, a studio went all in on a film. I know it was Netflix last year.
It was Netflix, and they should have gone
in on everything else except All Quiet on the Western Front. And then All Quiet on the Western Front picked up natural momentum. And then Netflix ran with it.
I know there aren't like second places. There aren't second places for Best Picture, but let's be real here. That was probably second place for Best Picture last year.
Yeah. The aggregator, second. Yeah, quite easily second. It won 4 Oscars, did it in the end?
I think it won 4 Oscars and was nominated to a lot of categories as well, which not many people were expecting, especially because that film wasn't at the festivals.
And Netflix do a very specific. In December, they've released one film every Friday for 4 weeks, and that's their Oscar ones. This year, we know we have Maestro, which is coming out on, is it Friday the 15th of December? We've got Chicken Little on the 8th, which is going to be the animation run. They have once again put out their
Chicken Little.
Sorry, Chicken Run. Chicken Little coming next week in the Disney ranking. Sorry, I know there's a chicken.
Please tell me no one put it on there. Side quest, here we go.
They haven't so far.
Oh, thank God for that.
We'll know next week. Tune in on
safe,
Sunday,
we're
people.
Safe.
But I'm not saying this was going to get the momentum, but it's a shame that a studio such as Netflix, because of how they release films, because of how they run the studio, it's as predictable as let's be honest, some films of theirs they are only funding to try and win Oscars for. And they'll always be known as the studio that might have been the big hoo-ha of online streaming, but they weren't the first streaming service to win Best Film. Apple has the record for that with Coda. But yes, Maestro is Netflix's headliner for this year for the Oscars. I'm trying to remember what they had as their headliner last year.
Last year, Bardo was one of them, I know that.
I think you're right. Knives Out, of course, got a couple nominations.
Was it something that just didn't get nominated?
I feel like there was a headline. I think it was Bardo, as you said. I think
Bardo was one of them. Whale wasn't.
One. There's got to be another. Sorry, I know they were.
I mean, Pinocchio.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't best animated.
Yeah,
but like Chicken Run too. Like they've got their animated film locked in, but. Don't worry about that for now. That's like an offhand chat, but it is interesting. If this film had the recognition that, let's say, Oppenheimer has, this would be coming out at the end of December. This would have had a festival run. It would be everywhere and would be getting to Netflix. Like what they're doing in Maestro, they've been very selective of how they marketed Maestro, and we know that Maestro has got executive producer credits from Scorsese and Spielberg because they're both attached to it at one point. Bradley Cooper, of course, directing. Bradley Cooper is now going to be able to promote his own film. But yeah, sorry to be way off point. Do we want to move away and talk about favorite scenes?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have a favorite scene? I can just tell you really broadly, it's the opening 20 minutes.
It's the opening 20 minutes. It's clearly the opening 20 minutes.
It would be a great short film, a wonderful short film.
It would win an Oscar as a short film, probably.
Yeah.
But it's the best part of the film by a long shot. And the film absolutely peters off afterwards. It delivers on tension. It delivers on kind of introducing the character. I think it plays the best Smith songs at the time of it. It sets everything up perfectly. It's exactly what you want to see from a film about an assassin. And I'll include kind of the getting away afterwards, kind of the quick exit, because it seems like it's all planned. And I think the fact that he's quite calm under the pressure, even though it's the first time something's gone wrong, is quite interesting as well. But yeah, the opening 20 minutes is clearly the best scene.
Yeah, I'm the exact same. And kind of segueing that into my final thoughts of this film. Listen, I think this film is fine. I think it's, as I said, it's competently directed, but I'm just not engaged with it from a story dynamic. And I think this is a film that may lend itself to time, that will lend itself to watching down the line. Are they going to release this on Blu-ray? Obviously not. Maybe there'll be a Criterion down the line. Who knows? Because that poster would make a phenomenal Criterion front cover. But it's a film that I think will be lost to the void of streaming as the years go by. That unless you're a Fincher fan or a diehard Fassbender fan, you're probably not going to watch this. You're not going to see this film. And you just know at this point next Friday, they'll be advertising another series or another film that they're going to release instead of this. They've given this its push for the opening weekend. And they'll be the first to drop it when there's something else to promote, which is why there's such a massive problem with streaming services. So it's a really sort of boring way to do a final thought on what's been a great 12 weeks. But this film, as I said, I think this film would have done a lot better with an actual established studio system release, a marketing campaign, a promotional push, a cinematic release. It wouldn't have pulled in big numbers, but it just feels like unless you're a Fincher fan, you didn't know this film was coming out this week. Simple as that. Netflix can say it's on their number one. They always say a Netflix original film's their most watched this weekend. But let's be honest, how many people are tuning in for this? How many adverts have you? I did see an advert for this, the football say, which really caught me off guard. And I laughed because it said in theatres. I was like, yes, clearly not. So yeah, there's my Netflix final thoughts. So again, I think the film is fine. It's competent directed. I just can't give it anything else other than that. Will I look at this and say, is it a top 5 Fassbender performance? Probably not. And he's great in it. But and I'm not saying he's wasted in it either. There's just Michael Fassbender is an actor I've just missed seeing in films, and I'd really like to get him back doing some good ones.
Nah, Fassbender's best performance is Steve Jobs. And this film, yeah, it's okay, it's fine. It's a bit of a bummer that we're ending it on a film that isn't like phenomenal or spectacular, but sometimes, with directors there have peaks and flows and stuff like that, and it's better than Mank. At least that's what we can take away from it. I'll probably watch it again at some point, or even if I just watch the opening 20 minutes again and don't watch the rest of the film, that's fine as well. But it's an okay film. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. It's not one of Fincher's best. It's, you know, but at the
Not
same
bad.
time, you're still going to get a quality film from it, and you know, people will be entertained by certain elements of it. I think some people like it, some people maybe won't like it as much. But you know, that's kind of how the way it goes and stuff like that. So yeah, that's all I'm kind of gonna say, because you know, I think we're pretty much on the same line here with this one. It's an okay film. Go and watch it if you can in cinemas, but now it's on Netflix, so well, guess you can't.
Exactly that. And listen, that's going to do for this review of The Killer. A weird way to end it, but maybe it's as cold an ending as this film is overall. Who knows? But that's not just going to do it for this review, but for this retrospective. Amazing to tick off another big name. Going back to, I think, was it September we started, or end of August when we began with Alien 3, week to week to week, heading up to this. Thank you to our amazing guests that have been on with us. We've, of course, had Paul, we've had Tom, Sam, many others. We have said at the start, we are obviously in a big process of change at the moment, which is why our approach has been somewhat different. We've got a lot of things happening in the background about pushing other stuff. We mentioned that Disney ranking video. That's going to go up next Sunday evening. A massive ranking on the Walt Disney Animated Classic films. But aside from that, of all the changes we're making as a channel, we know that we are going to keep director retrospectives. We don't do them often. It's not something we want to oversaturate the channel with. We like to pick a director. We like to go through their entire career from start to present, I guess we can say, and take it from there. And David Fincher is one that he absolutely needed to be done. And that's why we've done it. We've, of course, got a few other things. And also, we won't hide from the obvious. We were, of course, planning to do Denis Villeneuve, but these strikes led to a lot of changes, including No Dune Part 2 for now. But yeah, thank you for being involved in all of these as well. It's been great to get you on. As I said, to the guests as well, to people at home, for people's feedback, for their comments, their thoughts on this. Do get involved. Let us know your thoughts on The Killer. What else is coming up? Well, Doctor Who starts in a few weeks. So we're going to be doing Doctor Who for the first time on the channel. We've got the Disney ranking, as we said. We've got things in the pipeline. We've got home media reviews. Mission Impossible went up yesterday. We've got new releases galore. December's next month. Christmas is coming. I feel like new TV shows we're missing. Monarch reviews coming tomorrow. It's going to be very busy for a couple of months. We'll probably have a nice update video in the new year because there are things we want to do. There's stuff we're working on in the background. So when we can update those, we shall. But in the meantime, thank you all for watching, and be sure to join us on the next one. Take care.